Why does a plastic-wrapped turkey sandwich cost $15 at the NYC airport? This is a perfect example of an airport trying to have their cake and eat it too. And it's kind of diabolically clever. On the one hand, airports need to make money. And with people buying cheap airline tickets, airports have found a solution by turning themselves halfway into malls and charging businesses extremely high levels of rent, which the airport justifies because it's a captive audience that can't go anywhere else. Most of the $15 sandwich is ultimately going to the airport as rent, not to the CIBO food vendor as profit. But at the same time, there's public outcry over the absurd pricing, so the airport has to mollify lawmakers by insisting it'll come up with a policy where they won't charge more than 10% for what would be comparable in Midtown. The airport is trying to blame those greedy vendors. But this is a trick. Who could ever define that? Sure, you can compare Starbucks with Starbucks, but you can't compare a CIBO sandwich because it doesn't exist outside of airports, which is by design. That's the whole point, that easy comparables don't exist. And when a journalist tries to use a FOIA request to get at the comparables, they're stonewalled. The airport is trying to insist it's preventing jacked up prices, when in reality, it's the airport charging rent that generates those jacked up prices in the first place, and it tries to pretend like it plays no part. Evil, but clever.
With people buying cheap airline tickets, airports have found a solution by turning themselves halfway into malls. This is entirely overlooking the fact that you are a captive of the airport as long as the TSA screening process exists. At best, going through security is annoying and adds anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours of wait time, and at worst it is legitimately traumatizing. Prices are high simply because people are punished for leaving on foot, and people are prohibited from bringing many goods through security.
Yeah, airport security is not useless. I'm not against it. But at the same time, it's undeniable that the airport shopping industry can thank terrorist groups for justifying the existence of this absolutely inefficient system that keeps millions of people captive of their greediness.
I would be curious to compare to the 90s though. I remember when I was younger, I'd sometimes just go to the airport, back when you could just walk out to the gates, grab a snack, and then watch the planes take off and land. Obviously that's not a normal thing to have done, but in a world with lighter security, I remember airport food being around the same level as mall food court options, so it was an interesting option for getting out of the house. I'd be curious if there's some lower security path towards making airports more of a common space, not that there's any chance of it happening.
In the early 1990s, I was very late for a flight. My friend dropped me off at the departure area. I got out of the car 5 minutes before departure time. I ran through the airport to security, let them know what flight I was on, and then ran to the gate after walking through the metal detector fully clothed and sending my bag through X-ray. Security radioed the gate and the flight crew left the door open so I could board. I made it, took my seat and buckled in. They closed the door and the plane pushed back. Elapsed time car seat to plane seat was about 7 minutes. Every single person I interacted with was helpful and understanding. What strikes me today is that every single thing about flying sucks. Airports are just part of the problem. I know this sounds extreme, but they need to deregulate and privatize every single thing about the airline industry. Government just needs to ensure that liability flows in part to executives and board members, regardless of corporate structure. Airlines can form a consortium to operate ATS themselves and can modernize it, something the government is completely failing at. A modern ATC would let us break away from the hub model that gives airports so much power. And your sandwich will be cheaper at an airport closer to your destination, where you didn't have to wait an hour for security to feel you up and take naked pictures of you.
Changi in Singapore is very much a common space because the security is at the gate.
It's not useless, but it doesn't have to be as slow as it is. The government could hire 10x the number of agents to minimize lines without changing their budget by more than a rounding error, but they don't care to.
Any airport that actually cares will adapt a policy like PDX's street pricing, and then actually furnish the airport with places that exist out in the real world, not just these weird airport-only chains, who TF is Wolfgang Park, or one-offs, e.g. Trendeberhood Burger. Tourist District Tavern. I guess a really nice, more like airport with amenities you don't want to use, because they're too expensive, is still slightly better than a smaller airport, whose amenities you don't use, because they don't exist. At least you have an option, though it doesn't stop it from being annoying. Side note, maybe Lax needs $15 sandos if it means they can afford to unshit their airport.
How is a system that enables cheap airline tickets for everyone by selling expensive sandwiches to people who can afford it evil?
It's luring people into flying more than they should, which is polluting, and then trying to make up the difference by trapping those people in an area where they can only buy ridiculously overpriced stuff. The right thing to do would be more expensive airline tickets that account for the total cost of flying, including the pollution they cause, and then charging an honest price for the sandwiches. I mean, this sandwich costs almost as much as some airline tickets.
Hey, just bring your own food. Oh wait, I guess you can't thanks to security theatre. Guess you'll starve or fork over $15 for a shitty sandwich. Too bad we can't have nice trains. I mean, Amtrak is okay, but it doesn't even compare to the rail systems in other countries. Guess we're stuck polluting too. Thanks, Elon.
I've never been denied bringing food through security for US domestic flights. Do other areas prohibit that?
It has to be sealed and new to get past security as long as they notice it. But I may be misremembering. I've never been able to bring food or drinks.
Why does a plastic-wrapped turkey sandwich cost $15 at the airport? Despite the Port Authority rules on street pricing, the real reason is lack of competition. A single vendor receives the food contract for the airport, and they now have monopoly positioning and a captive audience. When Business X is the only seller, and when the customers are held captive and unable to go elsewhere, then prices will naturally rise to the maximum the captive audience is willing to pay. How many air travelers are willing to exit the security perimeter, to then need to take a cab to somewhere? Most airports are not located near dense shopping restaurant areas to purchase food, to then have to go back through security to return to their flight. And what few even have enough time between flight legs to even consider that go outside the airport for food trip as even possible. Plus, by the time the cab fee is factored in, even if they could find the identical sandwich for $5.50 on the outside, the $10 plus tip or more cab fee there and back would make the sandwich $15 or more in the end anyway.
How many air travelers are willing to exit the security perimeter, to then need to take a cab to somewhere? It doesn't need to be anywhere near that extreme. Lots of people pay exorbitant prices for food at movie theaters, and those facilities tend to be in commercial high-traffic areas with tons of food service options such as malls, downtown streets, etc. It's really not hard at all to grab a bite before going into the theatre, yet people still end up buying the rip-off theater food.
The really silly thing is that unlike at a movie theater, you can make yourself the same sandwich for $1.50 and bring it with you to the plane. The US has plugged this loophole, at least to a certain extent, by seizing your food, even if you just have a stopover between two other countries. They took my banana in NYC on a flight from Paris to Vancouver, and I'm still bitter about it.
I've never seen a sandwich store sell sandwiches. Talking normal-sized sandwich, not whatever small bite size they sell as regular size with shrinkflation, for less than $12-15 in big cities.
Even if they could find the identical sandwich for $5.50 on the outside, the $10 plus tip or more cab fee there and back would make the sandwich $15 or more in the end anyway. And there you have it, a perfect description of value. The sandwich costs $15 at the airport, because at the airport it's worth $15. It may be worth less elsewhere, but that's its value there. They're not selling a sandwich, they're selling a sandwich you can have between flights.
I remember being in one of the NYC airports and needing a plug socket adapter for my laptop for the flight. On Alibaba, 50 cents. On Amazon, maybe $1.05. In the airport, $35. This was back in about 2015. I did not buy it and got by as best I could. Such extraordinary prices materially impact the experience of traveling. To my eye, they seem short-sighted. I also finally realized some years ago, all the duty-free shops are a giant con. Yes, they are duty-free, but they're all charging about twice the high street price. I never buy in airports, which can inconvenient, and it is always unpleasant to witness when I travel. If I were running an airport, I would look to make the experience of travelers as pleasant as possible, rather than actually making it unpleasant.
Yes, they are duty-free, but they're all charging about twice the high street price. Same as zero commission exchange outfits that, yes, charge 0% commission on the receipt, but have jacked up all exchange rates by 10% instead.
And what about the planned maze to reach your gate? Planned so you are forced to pass in front as many shops as possible. The gate may be 50 meters away if you turn left, but the sign says you have to turn right, and it will become 200 meters in many shops. Then even worse, the fact that they announce your gate only 30 minutes before embarking. They do not want you to sit in a chair in front of your gate. Absolutely not. They want you to hang around and spend. But the worst, when they heat the water in the toilets so you cannot drink it. In Greece they even put a fake not potable sign, so you sure buy the world's higher overpriced bottle of water.
Do you mean sinks instead of toilets?
Bring your food policy is becoming a thing.
TSA will usually pull you aside and search your bag if you have food, so go ahead and take it out first.
Not if you are TSA pre-check, or better yet if you use Clear.